The case was filed almost 3 years ago. The Montgomery Improvement Association is suing HUD and the city for reallocating federal funds originally assigned for low-income areas to some other projects like the ball field at AUM. Watkins says the pretrial hearing is scheduled for June 18th, and he asked the council to let him pick an attorney with the city paying the attorney's fees. He says since the city is paying for legal representation for the other council members, it should do the same for him. The actual suit names Watkins' predecessor, Herman Harris, as a defendant. Harris supports the position of HUD and the council, while Watkins supports the Improvement Association. If the city loses the case, it'll have to pay $6 million in liability. Mayor Emery Farmer is against the council paying for Watkins' attorney. He says the taxpayers shouldn't pay an attorney to attack the city's position. The mayor says the only way he'll initiate such a move is if the council passes a resolution providing the revenue to pay for the attorney's fees. No action was taken, but Council President Willie Peake says he'll get back with Watkins on what steps can be taken by the council on his request. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
To administer the oath of office to you, placing one hand on the Holy Bible and raising the other hand, pointing to heaven, and repeat after me as follows. I state your name. Do solemnly swear.
And of course, many of his ideas have not been looked upon too well by the legislature. I was approached again, probably 2 weeks ago, and again I didn't have any, interest. And then last week ago today, things started looking a little differently, so I became interested, and I certainly appreciate Governor James for offering me the opportunity to serve on the Public Service Commission.
Why did you decide to take this task?
I went into Tutwiler with several advantages. Most important, my one-day incarceration was voluntary, but still I went through the same admission process as the inmates, including fingerprinting and a mugshot. I was allowed to skip the medical examination and the lice bath. Prisoners here aren't kept under lock and key except in disciplinary cases and the one death row inmate. The rest live in 6 dorms. The inmates work 8-hour-a-day jobs 5 days a week. Jobs are selected on the prisoner's abilities and interests. My first job was in the laundry room. The workers there are responsible for laundering all the prisoners' dresses and linens. Inmates have the choice of wearing the prison dresses or their own street clothes, but each prisoner is responsible for her personal laundry. In another area, women in the floral arranging shop make beautiful displays, bouquets, and corsages, which they sell to state employees for cost, plus a small commission. My floral instructor, an inmate named May, plans to open her own florist shop when she gets out of Tutwiler. My next stop was the factory, where the inmates make all the garments for the whole prison system. Then it was lunchtime. So far, so good. I saw no fights or homosexuality that Tutwiler's warden, Kathleen Holt, had warned me about, although she also predicted the inmates would probably be on their best behavior. Enough of the light jobs, I was ready for some dirty work. With the help of inmates Sue and Mildred, and under the watchful eyes of 2 prison guards, I emptied the morning's leftover lunch at a dump about a mile outside the prison gates. But my real test was at the prison sewer that has to be cleaned daily. Back inside, I helped inmates Shirley and Brenda prepare dinner for the approximately 230 inmates, plus the prison staff. Then it was on to the hairdressing school, where I watched some of the latest styles and treatments in process. In addition to their assigned jobs, the inmates are responsible for keeping their living cubicles clean, and as an incentive, women in the cleanest dorm of the week are allowed Saturday visitors. Sunday is the regular visiting day, a time when many inmates spend time picnicking on the prison lawn with their families. Inmates are also allowed 10 minutes of telephone calls a week. The women with lighter sentences and good conduct records are allowed a several days leave every 6 months to spend with their families. If it sounds like prison life seems easy, don't be mistaken. Tomorrow night we'll look at the inmates' restrictions and problems like overcrowding, and also talk about one inmate who claims to be a victim of double jeopardy. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News. The inmates' main complaint is overcrowding and lack of privacy. Women are crowded 30 to a dorm with little space for personal belongings. In full capacity, beds are reported to be placed out in the halls and in the prison infirmary. In addition to the crowded conditions, there's no privacy. The toilets are without petitions, and mail is censored for contraband and other forbidden articles. Head counts are taken 5 times a day to alert prison authorities of missing prisoners, and according to Warden Holt, inmates do occasionally break out of Tutwiler, but not nearly as often as it happens in the men's prisons. While working my various jobs during my day at Tutwiler, I often forgot the women around me were prison inmates and possibly dangerous. Warden Holt says many of them are incarcerated for drug charges or crimes of passion, including murder, like the state's only female death row inmate, Deborah Bracewell. Those who break the law have no common characteristics regarding race, religion, or background. On the day of my visit, there were 128 black inmates and 93 white. The inmates never mentioned their convictions during our conversations, except one, who said she was a victim of double jeopardy and had earlier been released from Tutwiler. Further investigation revealed that Sue had been released, only to be charged with an additional crime relating to the original conviction. I asked Sue, who prison authorities say is a model inmate, how it felt coming back to prison after regaining freedom. Surprisingly, her reply lacked bitterness. She said she had no choice. That restriction was re-emphasized at the end of the day when I was leaving. The biggest difference between the inmates and me was that I had the freedom to walk out. They didn't. Jane Matheson, WSFA, TV News.
You didn't have no personal property up there. I didn't see one thing. I got the money. They're going to give you the money.
This is crazy.
Okay, what were you saying now?
I was just saying that I can't believe it's true because I had a lot of time to go. I had 17 months at least before I came up for parole.
What kind of sentence did you have?
I had, over here I have a 1-year sentence to 2 years probation. I had another 5-year sentence over in another county. So I don't know if this is all of it, but I'm just hoping that it is.
What are your plans?
And just to get out of here, go home, eat a first decent meal, and take a first shower I've had in 2 months.
Okay, what was your reaction when you were told you were getting out?
Just ecstatic, totally ecstatic. There's just no words for it. You know, it's just totally joy, that's all. Just like a miracle, that's all.
Say what, man?
I didn't even have to do anything to get involved in a lawsuit if I'm happy, but I got to stop. I got to stop. They are not coming right out in many cases and saying that they are selling them for the Montgomery Fire Department, but they are leaving some doubt there. Many citizens are calling me and asking me about it, and I'm having to tell them, you know, that the Montgomery Fire Department is not involved in this drive or in this sale of tickets to a rodeo in any fashion.
The phone solicitors are selling tickets to the annual championship rodeo sponsored by the South Montgomery County Fire Protection Authority, which is a volunteer fire department serving the Raymer community. But Montgomery City Fire Chief Jim Sutherland says the phone solicitors are leading the public to believing they're making a donation to the Montgomery City Fire Department.
They are not coming right out in many cases and saying that they are selling them for the Montgomery Fire Department, but they are leaving some doubt there. Many citizens are calling me and asking me about it, and I'm having to tell them, you know, that the Montgomery Fire Department is not involved in this drive or in this sale of tickets to a rodeo in any fashion.
Tom Ellis, the chief of the South Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department, is working in conjunction with a Nashville rodeo producer who's in charge of the phone solicitations. Ellis says the Volunteer Fire Department and rodeo producer Bill Harrington, who operates out of this Montgomery street address, split the ticket profits 50-50.
In my heart, I don't feel that they're doing it intentionally, letting the people believe that we are doing this as Montgomery City Fire Department. We are South Montgomery County Volunteer Fire Department Rescue Squad, and they are supposed to be saying this in their presentation.
Ellis says there's nothing illegal about the phone solicitations, and he says he's even sold rodeo tickets to Governor Fob James and former Governor George Wallace. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Some of those who testified before the Ethics Commission say the matter of possible conflicts of interest shouldn't even be decided by the Ethics Commission, but rather by the courts. Birmingham Senator J. Richmond Pearson describes the issue as a tug of war between factions in the House of Representatives over whether to include additional benefits for education employees. He says if the Ethics Commission will leave the matter alone, the power struggle will work itself out. Others, including Alabama Education Association's Paul Hubbard, say the insurance plan is general in nature and wouldn't affect educator legislators any more than it would affect about 100,000 others who would come under the plan. What's more, he says if the Ethics Commission decides such a vote is a conflict of interest, then the Commission will be flooded with questions of conflicts regarding many other bills. In fact, Hubbard presented the Commission with a list of some 35 possible conflicts of interest and asked that the Commission rule on those at the same time it decides the teacher insurance program. No one spoke in favor of restricting the bills legislators can consider. The Ethics Commission will wait until next month before making its decision. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
It was 2 years ago that Magwood was arrested for shooting Sheriff Grantham outside the Coffee County Jail in Elba. Since the shooting and Magwood's arrest in March of 1979, Magwood's attorneys have contended their client was insane at the time of the shooting. The defense rested heavily on the testimony of a Searcy State Mental Hospital psychiatrist who diagnosed Magwood as a schizophrenic and incompetent at the time of the shooting. Defense attorneys were also hoping to show that Magwood had a history of being treated with a number of different drugs used mostly for treating schizophrenics. But the prosecution countered with a clinical psychologist who testified that although he diagnosed Magwood as a schizophrenic, he didn't think Magwood was out of touch with reality when Grantham was shot. Since shooting a sheriff while on duty is a capital offense, the jury was faced with two deliberations. The first to decide if Magwood did in fact shoot Grantham and whether he was sane at the time. It took about an hour for the jury to return a guilty verdict. The second phase of their deliberations hinged on their recommendation of a sentence. In the case of capital punishment, it's either death in the electric chair or life in prison with no chance of parole. It only took a half hour for the jury to recommend death by electrocution. Throughout the trial, a dozen armed troopers and sheriff's deputies watched Magwood and the proceedings. Everyone entering the courtroom was thoroughly searched, but Magwood sat motionless through the two-day trial and now waits for the automatic appeal of his conviction. In Elba, Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Newly elected Governor Peter Crofton found out early that getting bills passed at times can be quite difficult. Unearmarking of state funds, rewriting the state's constitution, along with several judicial bills, were the bills Crofton backed in the Boise State's legislature. Lieutenant Governor Vincent Womack of Greenville ran things in the Senate chamber, while over in the House, Mike McVicker acted as the speaker. Both bodies of the legislature debated the issues, then it was time to vote. Governor Crofton says he and the other Boise Staters made a lot of new friends this week, but feels the biggest thing the boys go home with is a better understanding of their state's government.
When they see that, a certain bill they liked or a certain idea they thought was good got tied up in committee or didn't make it out or died or something, I think they'll be able to understand it, and they'll come out as better citizens, better able to work for their ideas and the stuff they like, because they'll know the system and what makes it tick.
Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV News.
The ProTech distributor compares his product with STP and DuPont. The test he does consists of comparing the ability of each product to absorb water, burn that mixture, see how clean the additive burns, and find out how great its friction resistance is. In every instance in this test, ProTech came out the winner. But this is where you, as a consumer, need to stop and think. The test was designed by ProTech manufacturers whose competitors say was done to make ProTech look good. Another thing to remember is that this test is not done under actual driving conditions, so the results may or may not mean anything substantial. Butch Norris distributes an engine treatment called Blaze. He also has a test to show how his product performs, but Norris says these tests emphasize the selling points of the different additives.
It doesn't prove anything when you're going product against product. It proves something when you have an oil base and then you add the product with the oil. It proves your product. But it doesn't prove anything when you got two products running head-to-head with it, because the man that's testing his product is going to win the test.
STP and DuPont distributors and manufacturers say the results from the ProTech test really prove nothing. They say since the test wasn't conducted under actual driving conditions or in a laboratory, they're skeptical of any new product with miracle claims. As far as the steps in the test are concerned, such as absorbing water in a test tube or burning clean, STP and DuPont spokesmen say their products are designed differently so they pick up the water slower, and since they contain oil, any open-air burning would cause a lot of smoke. As for the friction resistance test, they say the load and pressure can be varied, so the test is not necessarily an indication of what's actually going on inside your engine. But they also say there may really be something to the ProTech or other new products with similar claims. They say consumers need to be open-minded but skeptical until there is solid proof that the product actually does what the distributor claims. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
$500, no questions asked. Just call us or call the station or just get in touch with us, no questions asked. We need them bad.
Child labor laws apply to teens under age 18. Young people in the 16 to 17 age group aren't limited to the number of hours they can work, but are prohibited from working in 17 hazardous occupations listed by the Federal Wage and Hour Division. 14 and 15-year-olds can work no more than 8-hour days or a 40-hour week, and are also prohibited from hazardous occupations and other jobs like manufacturing, mining, and public messenger services. James Tucker of the Wage and Hour Division says the responsibility of finding out the specifics of the child labor law lies with the employer.
Surprisingly enough, we do find a substantial number of violations. As I said, primarily because many employers don't have the information they may need.
Tucker says most of the time the violations are handled administratively, but occasionally violators are charged up to $1,000 in fines for each violation. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Expert on Social Security, but just like any other employer.
Proposed are changes in in-state long-distance calling, which would mean a reduction in revenue for Bell. Another change is a restructuring of charges for some types of calls.
One of the biggest changes would be that all of our calls would be measured on a 1-minute initial period, whereas calls vary between, say, 2-minute or 3-minute initial period now. In addition to that, we are going to establish another class of calls, which would be a credit card call, which would be a 50-cent surcharge, whereas we don't have that right now.
Also, rates would be reduced for hearing and speech impaired customers who use non-voice equipment. Basic service charges would increase under the proposal. Add $7.30 to your monthly bill if you use Bell telephone equipment. Non-Bell equipment users would pay $5.80 more. Bell customers who call less pay less if they want the proposed measured service. That optional service would be available in Mobile and parts of Montgomery and Birmingham. And the 10-cent paid telephone call, which was established in 1954, would be increased to a quarter. Meanwhile, testimony continues as South Central Bell officials explain why they need more money to meet future telecommunication needs and operating costs while providing quality service to its customers. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
3 months ago, two local businessmen, Buddy Gillespie and John Jordan, built a track here so city riders could practice and race close to home. Until then, Montgomery motocross enthusiasts raced on the streets or on tracks near Selma and Slapout. Now riders are coming to Montgomery from as far away as Florida, Mississippi, and Georgia to compete, and they're racing for large purses, $1,000, rain or shine, about twice a month. Even though riders have been racing in Montgomery for but 3 months, several of them are national contenders in their classes. 15-year-old David Kelly, a member of the Gillespie racing team, is ranked second nationally.
You were recently competing in Tuscaloosa. Tell us about that.
Well, I never could come off the line up there too good. And I got a first in the modified and a second in the stop. And then I went up there again and I got a first in the stock and then the second in the modified that time. I switched it around.
That's pretty tough competition, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Handlebar to handlebar on the line.
Another member of the Gillespie team is 15-year-old Bud Gillespie Jr. What all do you think about when you're out there on the track?
Well, when you ride, you just concentrate on what you're doing and what line you're going to take, and the man in front of you watch him and try not to get your rhythm off. You just keep your rhythm and concentrate on what you're doing.
You ever get scared out there?
No, just on the start when you get scared, but once you go around the first corner, forget about it.
Bud is an experienced racer at the ripe old age of 15. The sport attracts riders as young as 3 and as old as 50. It's an expensive sport. Consider $1,500 for a bike and at least $600 more for riding gear. By the way, races are held here in Montgomery on Sundays, and riders are allowed to practice Monday through Thursday during the week. Fridays and Saturdays are spent putting the track back together. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
Basic monthly service charges would increase under the proposal. Residential customers who use Bell telephone equipment would pay $7.30 more per telephone per month. Non-Bell telephone equipment users pay $5.80 more. Also proposed are changes in in-state long-distance calling and a restructuring of charges for calls.
One of the biggest changes would be that all of our calls we've measured on a 1 minute initial period, whereas calls vary between, say, 2 minute or 3 minute initial period now. In addition to that, we are going to establish another class of calls, which will be a credit card call, which will be a 50-cent surcharge, whereas we don't have that right now.
Then there's the optional call less, pay less service that would be available to customers in Mobile and parts of Montgomery and Birmingham. Customers who use this service pay according to the number of outgoing calls they make daily. And the dime pay telephone, which has been in effect for 27 years, would end by raising the rate to a quarter. Bell officials say the increased cost would be covered by pay telephone users rather than all phone users. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Executive Officer, Healing Arts Board is Terry Dickinson, Patty Grammer. Secretary.
All those who spoke to the commissioners say that educator legislators should be allowed to vote on the insurance plan because they say that plan wouldn't affect individual legislators any more than any other bill introduced. Representatives and senators say if educators' votes on the insurance plan constitute a conflict of interest, then so do votes on tax measures and any other legislation that affects large groups of citizens. They say to prohibit legislators from voting on any bill that affects them would halt state government. The hearing turned sour when Montgomery Representative Cecil Wyatt said he has received pressure to vote for a bill that would do away with the Ethics Commission, and Wyatt indicated he might be more inclined to vote for that bill if the Ethics Commission decided to eliminate some of the bills he's allowed to vote on. Commissioners expressed regret that legislators appear to be threatening the Commission's future if its ruling doesn't suit some legislators. But commissioners didn't take action today and will probably not act on the conflict of interest question for another 6 weeks. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Figures of the county, employees, that sort of thing. So we do have documentation.
Down to the
An analysis of Elmore County's employment practices reveals that blacks are uniformly at the lowest occupational levels with virtually no realistic opportunity for advancement. It also reveals that the majority of those blacks employed work in maintenance or on the road crews.
Governor James signed the contract with Bryce Construction Company of Birmingham this morning, saying it represents a major step towards satisfying a federal court order to end prison overcrowding. With the signature, the 600-acre tract of land in St. Clair County will be transformed into a 600-man maximum security prison. James says he thinks they'll be able to finish the prison before the end of the 18-month contract. The governor also announced a decision to build another 600-man prison in West Jefferson County. He says he hopes to see bids on the contracts go out soon, shooting for a 1983 completion date. Until the prisons are completed, Governor James says he'll scramble to find space to house state inmates that the federal courts are considering releasing as early as next week. One option James says he's considering is temporary housing units located near each of 5 existing prisons. James says these temporary units could be wooden barracks or tents similar to these being used by the Texas prison system, which is also faced with overcrowding. The governor didn't rule out the possibility that he may try and meet with federal judge Robert Varner to talk about short-term alternatives to a mass prisoner release. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
An idle mind is a devil's workshop.
The 2 new prisons will accommodate 1,200 state inmates, yet there are currently more than 1,400 state prisoners scattered in county jails across the state. But Governor James isn't convinced of the need for a 3rd prison just yet.
We're putting up temporary facilities. There may be an opportunity to convert some of those to permanent, and we may come back in 90 days once we look at, as we judge further new criminal codes. And say we need 2 more prisons.
Another uncertainty in the long-range plans is where the state will get the $10 million a year to operate the new prisons once they're completed. The oil and gas lease money may only be used for construction, not operations. But the governor points out the oil and gas severance tax has been bringing a lot of money into the general fund this year, and he says that money could be used to run the new prisons when they open. Another option he sees is money that he claims would be saved if the legislature passes his government reforms. But in the past, finance officials have said the oil and gas severance revenue could stop at any time if oil companies slowed production. The governor thinks that risk is worth taking. And there's no guarantee the governor's reforms will pass either. However, the governor says he's looking for more money and that the legislature also has its responsibility.
They can come down to 1 or 2 alternatives. They can let them loose on the streets, they can raise taxes, or they can reform this government. And I believe one of the latter 2 will happen.
Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News. Okay.
Elmore County currently employs 144 workers. Of this number, only 14 are black. Today, the Alabama Civil Liberties Union filed an administrative complaint with the Office of Revenue Sharing in Washington on behalf of several Elmore County residents. The ACLU charges Elmore County with unfair hiring and promotion practices. The ACLU says that long-standing complaints from county residents prompted the group's action.
An analysis of Elmore County's employment practices reveals that blacks are uniformly at the lowest occupational levels with virtually no realistic opportunity for advancement. It also reveals that the majority of those blacks employed work in maintenance or on the road crews.
The county could lose all of its annual revenue-sharing funds if discriminatory practices are turned up in an upcoming investigation. That amounts to nearly $250,000. If the ORS investigation finds discrimination, Elmore County will have 15 days to respond. The county will then have 2 options: either comply with the suggestions of the Office of Revenue Sharing or face the possibility of having its revenue-sharing funds cut off. Elmore County officials say they haven't seen a copy of the complaint and at this time have no comment on the charges. Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV News.
Yeah. You got him going in?
This is really outstanding. I hope that even though we passed a bill, we are very far behind other states that have gone into the solar credits. And I'm sorry about that, because with our southern exposure, we ought to be at the front. We ought to be one of the leaders. But of course, one reason for that is the financial problems that we have experienced in the last few years in the state. 25%.
This is Jack, a 2-year-old golden retriever owned and trained by Tony Flowers, one of several women who actively participate in the Montgomery Retrievers Club. Dog owners help each other in training exercises during the week, but trial sessions on the weekends are very competitive. Ray Holder, whose Black Labrador Bull was Dog of the Year in Georgia a year ago, explains how it all works.
We have the person camouflaged over behind the trees on the other side of the lake, and he throws the duck out, and when the duck hits the water, or while he's in the air, the guy shoots a blank shotgun just like he had shot a duck in a duck hunting situation. Then he gives his dog the command to fetch. The dog has to go in the water, drive across there. We'll have the coys, tree limbs, everything else, just diversions in the water. He has to drive across, pick up the bird, and deliver it back to the handler, and we score them on how straight they go to the duck and back.
The retrievers are trained not to injure the ducks, and when live birds are not available, training dummies are used. Dogs in Bull's class are taught to respond to signals. Dog owners direct them to the target through a series of whistles and hand motions. The dogs and their owners receive ribbons for their efforts during competition. Practice sessions, though, are closed with something that resembles a free-for-all, a fitting climax to a job well done. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
And we've got things piled all over up here, and got a new flag here. They all think they will, but the forces are largely psychological and depend upon the presumption that because housing is unable to claim much of the dollars, that others will not claim it, and thus the rates can move down. And the presumption that our economy will slow down also. But there are many other factors that suggest this is not true. And in West Texas, I was in the band set up with the 3 legs, and they set it right on the edge. And, when the time came for me to be introduced, he said, "You don't want me to introduce."
Sometime next week, Bryce Construction Company of Birmingham will begin working this land in St. Clair County, hoping to change the landscape to this within 18 months. It'll be a $21 million prison designed to house 600 inmates and provide up to 200 jobs for local residents. Governor James signed the contract with the prison architects and contractors standing behind him in his office today. Governor James said this represents a major step toward meeting the court order to reform the prison overcrowding conditions. James also announced a decision to build another $21 million 600-man prison in West Jefferson County that could be in operation by next summer. Governor James defended the 2 new prisons in North Alabama by pointing out statistics that show that more than half of the prison population comes from North Alabama, a quarter of which come from Jefferson County. But the 2 new prisons will only house 1,200 of the more than 1,500 inmates now being kept in local and county jails. But the governor says additional prison needs will be considered this fall. In the meantime, the governor says he'll scramble to find space to house the prisoners that the federal courts are thinking about releasing. Some options now being considered by the James administration include wooden or temporary barracks located near the major existing facilities. These barracks reportedly will absorb about 500 state inmates now being kept in those county jails. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Robert, I'm going to get you to respond.
The arrest was made here at the Holiday Inn in Clanton. Investigators say Hope had arranged to meet his hitman here to deliver $500 and a rifle. They also say Hope had offered to pay $2,000 more after Graddick's death. But the man Hope thought he had hired to be his hitman turned out to be an ABI agent. And once the drop was made, the investigators closed in. There's speculation that Hope, seen here in a 1940s picture, may have been looking for revenge in his alleged plot to kill the three men. Both District Attorney William Hill and Judge Harold Walden had been involved in prosecuting and convicting two of Hope's sons on murder charges in 1978. They're both serving life sentences now. As for Attorney General Charles Graddick, he's tried to slow down inmate releases by the Board of Pardons and Paroles in recent weeks, and investigators say that's a possible motive for placing Graddick on the hit list.
I felt fairly safe for my own personal safety. My investigator and the Sheriff, Buddy Glasgow, were most helpful in that situation. I never really felt like I was in any immediate danger.
Hill also says that Hope has joked about and mimicked the Attorney General for his efforts to keep the violent criminals in jail. Graddick says he's relieved the investigation is over, and he says he hopes the suspect will stay in jail a long time. Early this morning, Shelby County Sheriff's deputies and investigators from the DA's office searched the Hope house, looking for evidence that might assist in their investigation. Hope is being held in the Elmore County Jail on bonds totaling $750,000. Each of the three charges against him carries a possible penalty of 10 years to life in prison. The investigation of Hubert Hope's planned assassination attempt had been going on for 3 weeks. The three men involved, the judge, the DA, and the Attorney General, knew they were targets the entire time. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News, Shelby County.
There's more to the story of the alleged plot to assassinate the three officials. Special assignment reporter Norman Lumpkin tells us more about the investigation that led to last night's arrest.
Hubert Hope was under surveillance by agents of the Alabama Bureau of Investigation hours after he allegedly approached a state prisoner and asked for help in locating a hitman to kill the Attorney General and two other men. That was 3 weeks ago. Hope had come to see the man about one of his sons who was serving a life term for murder. My sources say Hope told the inmate Jesse Jett he wanted someone for the job and would pay them $2,000. He said he would also supply the weapon. The inmate immediately told prison officials about the conversation, and the State Bureau of Investigation was notified. My sources say Hope tried to be cagey by only discussing the alleged plot with inmate Jett and never discussing anything on the phone about the alleged plans. Hope was placed under 24-hour surveillance. He made several more visits to inmate Jett, allegedly to work out how to deliver the money and weapons to a prearranged site. Every visit was monitored by state agents. At first, 2 drop points involved a car left by agents who say they watched as Hope drove up, checked out the car, and drove off without leaving the money or the weapon. Last night was the 3rd time. They say this time he placed the weapon in the trunk of the car and left a $500 partial payment for the assassination. That's when agents moved in and arrested the truck driver. The weapon Hope was allegedly supplying is described as either a World War I Springfield or Mauser rifle. That weapon is now being checked by authorities for serial numbers. So far, the only possible motives for Hope's purported plot police can think of at this point is the role each of the intended victims played in the prosecution of Hope's 2 sons for the drowning death of a Shelby County man in 1978. Hope reportedly complained that his sons were framed. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
The arrest was made here at the Holiday Inn in Clanton. Investigators say Hope had arranged to meet his hitman here to deliver $500 and a rifle. They also say Hope had offered to pay $2,000 more after Graddick's death. But the man Hope thought he had hired to be his hitman turned out to be an ABI agent, and once the drop was made, the investigators closed in. The investigation of Hope's alleged plans to kill the 3 men had been going on for 3 weeks. Hope is seen here in a 1940s picture. All of the men involved, the Attorney General, the DA, and the judge, knew about the threats on their lives, and they participated in the investigation. The reason for the alleged plot, some say it could have been revenge.
Sentenced both his boys to life imprisonment. I guess that, grew out of that. It's the only reason I can put to, that he would have any reason to be angry at any of us.
Hill and Judge Walden both were involved in prosecuting and convicting 2 of Hope's sons on murder charges in 1978. They're now serving life sentences. The reason the Attorney General was included on the hit list, investigators say it could be because of his efforts to stop the Board of Pardons and Paroles from releasing inmates.
The survey is being conducted by the Center for Educational Services on the Auburn University at Montgomery campus. Survey coordinator Dr. Ed Richardson says the questionnaires were sent to 4 groups: all high school students in the public school system, area businessmen, Montgomery County High School graduates over the past 5 years, parents, and other interested persons. Magnet School Planning Coordinator Essie Buskey says the results of the survey will determine if the Magnet School is built.
The whole purpose of the surveys will be to tell us what the community thinks. We need input from the students, we need input from parents and the general community, we need input from business and industry.
Dr. Richardson says the original May 27th deadline for returning questionnaires has been extended to June 15th, with the results published the early part of July. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The plan to cut back employees began as one of a few alternatives to bring the Department of Pensions and Security within its current budget. But many of the employees who face a transfer say money is no longer a question. P&S Deputy Commissioner Gil Jennings admits the department can afford the employees it's planning to transfer, but says they'll be transferred anyway for 2 reasons: to decrease the Montgomery office staff size and to help fill vacancies at the county offices, which now sit empty because of a statewide hiring freeze. Of the 100 workers in question, only 25 have reportedly voluntarily agreed to move. It was mostly the other employees Jennings met with individually today, giving them an assigned county and until Monday to accept or reject it. Jennings says if they don't accept and don't have a good reason, they'll be assigned to that county anyway. Many of these employees are upset about the options.
My own opinion is probably that your job here would be terminated, and if you did not want to transfer, then you would be without employment.
Others feel the department is trying to be accommodating about specific transfer requests, but say they're not happy about knowing they'll have to transfer to another county or possibly look for another job. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
The next few minutes, he is Judge John C. Godroll. I'd like to give you a little bit of cover activities in order to get ready here tonight. Celebrate with these graduates. This is both solemn and happy occasion for them. We give both a... I hope I come out a little better on this deal tonight than other commencements.
When Hope was arrested Wednesday night, agents found a rifle with identification markings removed, along with $500 that Hope allegedly delivered to his hitman to use in killing the 3 men. When they searched his house, investigators looked for evidence that would further implicate Hope.
We were looking for grinding tools and stuff like this, and
What would a grinding tool do?
it could be used to file numbers off or whatever, you know.
That was to get the numbers off the gun, possibly?
Possibly, yes.
Besides the grinding tools, investigators confiscated rifles, pistols, bank records, and clothes. Glasgow was holding the evidence, going through it all, trying to decide which can be used in the trial. The Attorney General will prosecute the case if Hope is indicted. Investigators say they have no doubt Hope is guilty. They say besides the evidence taken from Hope's house, they have films of the alleged drop taken by ABI agents and testimony from an informant. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
The people of Alabama must know that the department that touches the lives of almost 1 million Alabamians through programs for its elderly, children, the blind and disadvantaged, and those affected by disasters is being systematically made ineffective by an insensitive governor and a staff of yes persons who are more interested in their jobs than they are in justice and righteousness.
Cooper says the attempt to transfer welfare workers is insensitive and illegal, and he's calling on the governor to allow the Pensions and Security Board to operate the department according to law. He also says board members should be appointed for their interest in welfare work rather than for political reasons. Cooper was fired April 3rd after the governor stacked the P&S board with the votes to oust him. The former welfare chief says he thinks the money is available to run the department properly. When asked who's running it now, Cooper said it's questionable if it's being run. He describes employees as demoralized and says he hopes that in 1982 voters will find a governor who's more interested in human suffering than in buying a new state airplane. Governor James was unavailable for comment. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Was critical in bringing this country into. The reach of our influence will be determined by the strength of the nation, particularly economic, and by the skills of our diplomats.
Gary Lee Brower, summa cum laude. Tammy Burks, cum laude. Dorothy Francis Kemp.
No Major League contracts were signed today, though general information cards were penciled in, giving the Red Scouts an idea of each player's background. Once on the field, the prospects were first asked to run 60 yards against a stopwatch. Their times were recorded for further evaluation. Then while the pitchers warmed up in the outfield, fielders displayed their skills throwing to home and to third base. Again, records were kept of their efforts. But the players were judged on more than athletic ability. Julian Mock, who's been with the Cincinnati Reds since 1967, says he looks at a player's intensity on the field.
I'd rather have the guy that has less ability that really has a great desire to play.
Mock has scouted a four-state area over the past 2 years, covering South Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. He has seen at least 2 of the Cincinnati big leaguers make it from tryout camps like the one in Montgomery.
Danny Dreesen is playing first base for us as a tryout camp player. Came out of a tryout camp in South Carolina. That's one of the ones. We also had Ray Knight in a tryout camp in Macon, Georgia several years ago. That wasn't where we first saw him, but we had him there to kind of cultivate an interest in him and check out and see how well he could do. Ray Knight was signed as a pitcher, by the way.
Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports. Lane Wallach and William Spear shared medalist honors, each posting a 69 on the par 71 Woodley course. Wallach out of Rolling Hill started fast and was 3 under through 4 holes today. Spear, another Montgomeryan, had a no-bogey round of 69. The co-leaders are 1 stroke up on Talbert Griffin and Tim Causey. Griffin out of the Montgomery Country Club played the back 9 in 33. Causey's the only non-Montgomeryan among the front runners. He's from Atlanta. 6 golfers are tied for third, another shot back, including 4 of the home course favorites. Larry Blanton, David Head, Frank Galero, and Marvin Driver all played their course even par. Montgomery Country Club Scott Gilreath and Rolling Hills Chip Carpenter also posted 71s and are just 2 back of the co-leaders Wallach and Spear. Some others to watch are Selma's Frank Cothran, Montgomery's Hamp Green and Conwell Hooper, and Woodley's Ed Brown, to name a few. Brown made a hole-in-one yesterday on the par 3 11th hole. This is his approach to the par 4 8th today. It looks close, but Ed actually flew the green. He saved par, however, with this putt on his way to a 2 over 73. You certainly can't count him out with 36 holes still to be played. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
I think we're constantly evaluated in school, and I think this is a waste of time in addition to an added expense.
That response was commonly shared among several of the 200 prospective teachers taking the test in Montgomery. Some, however, felt the exam was a good idea. One student says taking the test makes the teaching profession more professional.
I think we need a weeding process. The teaching profession is so saturated now that you can't find a job, and this can only limit the prospective teachers, and it can only help you find a job if you are a better student.
This is the first time the test is being administered to all prospective Alabama teachers, and that was another objection voiced by several students. One future instructor suggested giving the exam to those who have already been teaching a number of years. Others, saying some of the questions were difficult to answer, had mixed feelings about the exams.
Parts of it, yes. Parts of it, no. I don't see where certain parts are relevant at all.
Like what?
Just different questions that were asked on the test itself, and, you know, that just don't seem like they're going to weed out whether you're going to be a good teacher or not. You know,
those passing the test are given teacher certification awards. Those failing, however, get temporary certificates and have 1 year to take and pass the test before becoming certified Alabama teachers. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Got to think about it, so I took off up north Mississippi. Old Bone was pretty.
Well, I just always been a hobbyist, I guess, on old cars, street rods, that kind of thing. I found this one owner just out of Atlanta, down near Hampton. Decided I'd just give it a shot, see how it turned out on restoring back to the original one time.
How much?
No, we don't have any special jobs. We are a group of unemployed persons, and we have gotten together and decided that we would advertise our services, and we've also invited people like yourself who would like to get on our list and be available for.
This ad appeared in this week's Bulletin Board Community Advertisement Guide. Mrs. Willie Mae Whitlow is trying to get unemployed people jobs, and she provides this service absolutely free. Mrs. Whitlow says since the ad was placed, she has received numerous calls.
People start calling us around, I'd say 12 o'clock at the earliest yesterday morning, and they've been calling constantly, even into the night, until we asked them to please start calling about 8 o'clock this morning, and they've been calling continuously since, saying that they would like to work.
Mrs. Whitlow, who's unemployed herself, says she hopes to find work as well as helping others find jobs. So far, the only calls she's received have been from people wanting work. Now she is waiting for calls from people needing jobs done. Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV News.
You've often said that legislators and the reason that reform isn't going through is because many of them are bought lock, stock, and barrel. Do you really believe that?
Well, let me say that might have been a little harsh. I don't mean bought like you buy a loaf of bread, but I think they are influenced by special interest groups sometimes to the point where they lose sight of the overall picture and what's in the public interest through campaign contributions. That has an effect on folks. and through constant entertainment, and that's all they hear. Now, you know this. You go up there on the second floor, and all you see is lobbyists. You don't see the men and women from the farms and factories around this state, very seldom. And then those that are not lobbyists, the great majority, who y'all see up there when you cover the House and Senate, have a vested interest in the tax dollars and get something from it, one way or the other. And it's incumbent on the governor, elected by the people, to look at the overall public good, public interest. I believe it is incumbent on the legislators to do that. Now, I understand this, that if a senator or a House member, if they got an institution of some sort in their district, and most of them do. Some of them got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 institutions in their districts. For them to say, we need to cut that back is a difficult decision to make. But Lisa and Chris, we have reached a point in this country, in this state, where we've got to make some hard decisions.
Still going back to the moral values of the legislators as far as being influenced by lobbyists. Is there a solution to that?
I think the solution, in the ultimate sense, rests with the people. They got to know what's going on. A special session, as an example, will be very enlightening because the issues will stand out like a sore thumb. Who is the legislature or the governor to deny the people the right to vote on something like earmarking or unearmarking when we're totally different in structure from all the other states, and you can make a sound argument that that process is archaic, that it makes a mockery out of zero-based budgeting, that it has not been good for education, that happened 30, 40 years ago, and the people were allowed to vote then. Why not let them vote today? There is no counter-argument to that. And the people need to understand it, and I think they will understand it. And as they understand these things, and I'm talking about issues, not personalities, they're going to look to people that will stand for a position on the issues.
Europe, home of the British Isles, Paris, France, London, England, and Rome, Italy, are the travel hotspots for vacationers this year. Local travel agent Elise Hilpern says people are splurging with travel expenses to enjoy themselves and are going overseas during a rebounding year for vacationing.
Business has steadily improved since the 1st of January. We had a slump last year, and this year it's begun to pick up.
Why is it picking up?
I think people are more optimistic about the state of the nation, and they feel better about everything. They think things are going to get better, and they are better.
Mrs. Hilpern says Las Vegas is the hot spot in this country and is known as the unique spot worldwide. She says both American and European citizens are traveling more in the United States this year since vacationing slacked off considerably last year. Mrs. Hilpern says European tourists like this country because their money buys more here, and she says the American dollar situation in many parts of Europe has stabilized, meaning a good year for travel overseas. And if you're thinking about taking a European vacation, Mrs. Hilpern says a quality tour costs about $3,000 per person, and the average travel expense overseas is about $1,500. She says normal airfare to Europe runs about $1,000. But isn't that a lot of money?
Not if it includes meals, because meals are very expensive, whether they're in the United States or whether they're in Europe.
Kim Davis, WSFA, TV News.
first arrested them, they said they believed they had the right people and that they had enough evidence to convict them. And then the next time I went back, they said they had enough evidence to convict Hayes and not the two Eggert boys. Okay, now they come up with they don't have enough evidence to convict either three of them. And that's real sad. We're going to protest Saturdays and Sundays. We're going to go to church and pray for them. On Sundays, we're going to come home, we're going to get ready, and we're going to come right back down here and protest.
The death toll along Alabama highways has increased sharply over previous years, while the number of non-fatal accidents has declined. According to state highway department officials, the reasons for the increases in highway deaths is the rising number of drivers disregarding the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit and an increase in the number of small cars that get hit by larger vehicles. These figures have triggered state troopers to crack down on speed violators. This past week, State Public Safety Director Jerry Shoemaker asked state troopers to crack down on speed violators and drunk drivers. Shoemaker says there's been 1,800 fewer rural accidents as compared to the same time last year, but 116 people died in rural highway crashes during the past 2 months compared to 81 deaths during the same months in 1980. In Shoemaker's words, the help of all drivers in obeying traffic laws and using seat belts can reduce the number of accidents and the number of deaths they cause. So far, at least 6 people have died in weekend traffic accidents. The toll includes 2 people killed in Cullman and Covington counties. How well the trooper crackdown will work in deterring speed violators isn't certain, but troopers say one thing's for sure: driving slower can save lives, maybe your own. Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV News.